our deserts as people or as a planet are growing because the desertification of our souls is growing. I really believe that at a deeper level, this is a soul crisis, a spiritual crisis. With that, during the COVID, I was reflecting on that a lot and continue to, as with this work that I do every day here in New Mexico. And I go for a walk almost every morning, or I let the walk take me. And I live in the North Valley off of one of the acequias, or the irrigation system ditches. And so it's there's trees and it's quite lovely. And then there's another area I walk and there's not cars or anything. So one morning I was walking early, and it was right as the sun was coming up. And I was thinking, oh, trees, you're so lucky. You know what you're supposed to do. I mean, you're a tree. You have roots, you grow, you photosynthesize every day. You help us have oxygen to breathe. And then I saw the ants and I said, oh, ants, you know what to do too. I'm envious of you. And then I saw a coyote and I thought, oh, coyote, you're really out there this morning and you're doing your job. So what is my job, or what is my work in the world? And it occurred to me as the sun came up, the sun is really what helps us have life on this planet and is essential. And without that, we wouldn't have the photosynthesis, we wouldn't have the trees, we wouldn't have food. And I certainly can't create food either, not even for myself. So it came to me that my job as a human being is to photosynthesize love, to take this energy of the holy that permeates everything every day. And we're reminded of that with the sun, also the moon, but we're breathing in, and the great religious teaching saying the Holy One, God, is so close as our breath. And so I thought, well, my job is to photosynthesize love. And that's been very helpful, I have to say. And what does that mean for a human being to photosynthesize love? Well, it means to be in gratitude for life, to admire the beauty, and to take action, because the humans right now, we're the ones who are basically upending the planet and don't quite understand this evolutionary process or the evolutionary path that we are on as human beings, and we're called to wake up. And then I came across this Mary Oliver poem, which I really love, and it's called My Work is Loving the World. And I'd just like to share that poem with you. My work is loving the world. Here the sunflowers, there the hummingbirds, equal seekers of sweetness. Here the quickening yeast, there the blue plums. Here the clam deep in the speckled sand. Are my boots old? Is my coat torn? Am I no longer young and still not half perfect? Let me keep my mind on what matters, which is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished. The phoebe, the delphinium, the sheep in the pasture, and the pasture, which is mostly rejoicing since all ingredients are here, which is gratitude, to be given a mind and a heart, and these body clothes, a mouth with which to give shouts of joy, to the moth and the wren, to the sleepy dug up clam, telling them all over and over how it is that we live forever. So I'd just like to repeat a couple of lines in here that I think are really significant for us as people of faith on a spiritual journey. My work is loving the world, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished, which is gratitude to be given a mind and a heart and these body clothes. So our work is loving the world. So what does that mean? I want you to reflect on that just a minute. What does that mean for you in action? And how can that be an influence in this moment and this time, and as we work on climate change? And then I'm going to share a couple of stories, and I'm going to ask you for your thoughts on it. So a few years ago, with New Mexico Interfaith Power and Light, I invited people across the state to send a photograph, a short story, a poem or something of what it is that they loved so intensely that they did not want it to be destroyed. And I remember in particular one story from a woman near Las Cruces who was a farmer. And she sent me pictures and she sent a story. And she said, my brother and I, we walked down to the Rio Grande River in the spring. And we saw young people playing volleyball in the sandy river. There was no water. And she said, in fact, the only water I saw were the tears in my eyes. So this woman was loving intensely her work, their profession as farmers, and also in her own spiritual way was seeing what was important. And she was grieving for that. And part of our work in loving the world as people of faith is not shrieking away from that which is difficult or the suffering or that which is sad or the grieving. We need to embrace that and to walk through that in order to do this work of loving. And I really believe that in our time where we have so much division in our country, that part of the reason we're having that is because people know loss and they're seeing it all around them in collapse of systems in different ways. And they are suffering. And so some people take that suffering and they try to work with it and come up with strength in working with others. Others, it's a place of they don't know what to do, so it ends up being a division. But we have to face it. And that is part of loving the world. A couple of the short stories. So I've gone to a couple of the UN COP meetings in Copenhagen and also in Paris. And I had the opportunity of hearing women and people from other countries. And I remember one woman from Kenya saying, you know, we used to know what the seasons were. And in our country, most of the farmers are women. We knew what the seasons were. We knew who we were, what we were. We knew when to plant. But now it's all changed and we don't even know when to plant and how to grow. And I just want our seasons back. This is a woman who loved her place, who loved her farming, and who loved what she knew of the world and didn't know how to respond to it. Another short story, several years ago, when before COVID, we had the influx of all of the people from Central America, especially from the arid triangle. You know, Sister Marlene that works in immigration and myself, we went down to the border and worked in some of the hotels with these people coming across. And I said to one of the young men who had his little girl with him, I said, well, why are you here? And he said, well, you know, we've not been able to grow a crop for 3 years. We're starving. We have no other choice but to leave our beloved home. We have no choice. And so climate change is affecting people all over the world and causing this great migration and refugees. And he loves his place. He loved his children. He had no choice but to come. So that's what loving the world is too. It means making sacrifices, enormous sacrifices that some of us will never even know about, leaving our homeland so that we can have life for our children. So with this, for you, what does loving the world mean in this time of climate crisis, of these challenges? And just a few people, if you want to say something.
I think for me, Joan, just wildlife and animals. I was telling my wife this last night. I said, with climate change, it's just so amazing to see these animals, to be up close to like a bighorn sheep or an elk, to hear them bugling in the Valles Caldera, cutthroat trout, and just them being themselves, like you were saying with the tree, and just how, for me, it's exquisite to see the creativity and beauty of God in those animals too, and how, there's so many unique species and just how these ecosystems come together. And so I think for me, the opportunity of loving the world is just that, of just being there and observing all these different animals and kind of seeing how they work together and what they mean in kind of these bigger systems. I think the harder thing for me in loving the world is the human side, where it's easy right now to get so very frustrated with what we're doing and the fact that we're the one species that knows better. that's impacting all species. And I think that that's the really, the big challenge. I was telling my wife that I said, it's easy for me to be in creation, to love wildlife, to love all these different species. I said, it's much harder when it comes to our own species, and especially that we are causing suffering across, millions of other species.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. That challenge is, I think we've forgotten who we are. We don't know who we are as human beings and what our work is. Thanks. Anyone else want to share?
Yeah.
Tony.
So, this is just perfect timing because, so Andrew's received a couple months ago an essay I wrote, sort of reflecting on, the specialness of nature during the pandemic and so forth. But, so what I've been struggling with more recently is really this, sort of what is my work, and some sort of crises of frustration with my work experiences as a professor. And, part of what even just this conversation is sort of a regrounding about, it's about planting seeds. It's about, teaching and mentoring young people and helping them to wrestle with the suffering and the harm that we're causing, not only to nature, but to ourselves. Dehumanization and oppression and marginalization are really tough things. And as a young person to sort of tackle that, and in a setting where they're trying to learn knowledge and professional skills and so forth, it requires a lot of love. And so I think that that's very helpful this morning, at least for me, in just sort of recentering that.
Mm-hmm. Tony, thank you. I mean, you're a man after my own heart, because this is something I keep grappling with young people and young adults, and with Interfaith Power and Light, trying to figure out how to do this, because I think the spiritual traditions, the institutions as that they have been, are not working. And we, in more than any other moment, have the huge responsibility, but also the great joy in that, to figure out how to mentor people in love, in this deeper spiritual place, in this deeper spiritual foundation that I believe that we need so desperately, as you experience every day, as we move deeper and deeper into this warming world and the crises that we're facing. That so that we can, so that they have the tools, the spiritual and foundational tools, to not only walk through this time, but I think if we're in spiritual practices, it opens us to some of these creative ideas like that Andrew was talking about, the creativity in the natural world. We're part of the natural world, so we have creative abilities as well. So there are things the world needs, because we're part of it, that we haven't even thought of. And we're not going to if we're in a state of panic or paralysis, which is, Joanna Macy talks about this way into the future that we're in now. And it was a wonderful DVD or little video that I got across my desk a couple of weeks ago. I passed on to some people. I'd be happy to pass it on to you all if you let me know who would be the best person. But it's a wonderful reflection. And she's a Buddhist. And Joanna Macy says, in this way to the future, we're walking, and we better walk arm in arm, but we're walking on this narrow precipice kind of. And there's two ditches on either side. And one is paralysis and the other is panic. And the paralysis, certainly what it's like, it causes people, as I talked to some young people, to go shopping. So I said to some young people, well, do you talk about or listen to each other's thoughts on these things like climate change or racism or whatever. And, but in climate change in particular, they said, oh no, that would be a downer of a day. We go shopping or we talk about music or football or whatever, but we don't go there because that's a downer of a day and we don't want a downer. And I thought, and these are, of course, young people that are privileged and have the privilege to do that. So so we know, and we know what paralysis, but we also know what panic is like. I think we are panic in this country right now. January 6th was panic. it was like grief at something that's being lost, not knowing what to do. So you organize and you create panic. So I think this is a huge challenge that really behooves us to have deeper conversations about spiritually, what is our role, what is our practice, what do we need to do as religious traditions in this moment. And, I dearly love the Presbyterians, but Andrew made a comment earlier, it has to go through 3 committees first. And I jokingly, but actually very seriously said, we don't have time for 3 committees. We need to do some experimentation even and just sort of jump in there and see what works and doesn't work. And in my work, IPL has done it quite a bit. Some things don't work, some things do. So, but I think that's part of the invitation of grace. So thank you, Tony, for that. Is there one more person that would want to share what this love means?
I think somebody in the in-person meeting was trying to share. Joan.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. We can't hear.
Yeah, you guys basically I was just going to add to what you said, but you kind of gave my answer. What came to me was, was to not, part of my work of loving the world is to not become overwhelmed with the enormity of what's in front of me, in front of us. So as to be able to do that, so as to be able to make my individual contribution one life at a time, with whoever I'm walking through this time with, whether it be in my profession, whether it be in my spiritual community, whether it be just in the public arena, in the town square, to be able to walk through that, I have to remain non-overwhelmed and focus on the one life that's in front of me, whoever it is that I'm dialoguing with. So anyway, you kind of gave my answer there too.
No, that's an excellent point. And I think that what you brought up of being overwhelmed, people often feel that and say, I'm just not going to do anything or whatever. But I think what's key in that is to at least have this kind of consciousness of the place that we're in with climate change. And then that begins to affect even how I relate, who I am. I believe that there's no thought or prayer that is lost. And it has, all of those have some effect collectively in our spiritual work. And so that's very important. And to keep kind of focused in what you're doing, and that's important. It's sort of like that one tree photosynthesizing. And if I'm photosynthesizing love, some of it's, right in front of me, and some of it goes out larger, like those prayers and thoughts to the larger world. And some days are easier than other days. Like yesterday, I was not doing so well with some certain things. And I said to Sister Marlene, whom I live with, I said, I'm trying to photosynthesize love, but it's a cloudy day today. So some days are better than other days. So anyway, but so with this, so Harry, I hate to say this, but I'm changing your question. I don't think it should be, is there any hope? Or what is it that you hope in? Or where is hope found? I get these questions all the time in this work. And I have to say, I've never really liked that question of where there is hope, even though we have addressed it. And actually this month in our IPL work, we have short little videos of different people saying what gives them hope. But I think the deeper question is, reflects around this, my work is loving the world. So what, am I loving the world? What is my work in loving the world? How is my work in loving the world facing the challenges that we have in climate change? So I think it's around love. And actually that's the foundational message of any message in our religious traditions and in Judeo-Christian. So the Proverbs 17:17 says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother and sister is born from a time of adversity. I love that because we are in that adversity moment right now. And Micah, which actually this piece from Micah was used when I made my vows as a Franciscan sister. And this is what God asks of you, to act justly, love tenderly, and walk humbly with God. And so that love is foundational. And then of course, in Matthew, where it's asked, what is the law, or what is the commandment? And Jesus says it's to love God with your whole heart and your whole mind and your whole soul. And then the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. And our neighbor is, as Andrew said, all the creatures and the fish and the birds and the trees that are photosynthesizing, the ants, the cells in my body, the microbes in my body, even the all of those creatures that are in my body. We aren't even aware of those. Those are all my brothers and sisters. So we have plenty of opportunity for loving in all kinds of dimensions. So with that, I wanted to just jump in and share a few things that we're working on with IPL in terms of some policy advocacy. And some of this moves into the federal, but most of it is state. And just to say that, being present to the moment is vital. This sense of love, of gratitude, of awe, of wonder. And that is what then infuses our other work that we're doing. And we do need to be engaged in some public ways, or I call it in the marketplace, in policy advocacy, because we need some big changes right now. And that's has to happen. But what we're doing as a personal spiritual path infuses that we're doing. So, and a couple of these things I'm going to talk about, you can act on immediately. So I hope you have little pens and papers there or something. And so the first one is here in New Mexico, we have a huge oil and gas industry, and it's very polluting. And we have a lot of methane gas that's being wasted, leaked, vented, and it's not really regulated. And even where we find that it's at fault, there's not the funding in our budget for accountability, to call upon accountability. So we've been working on with a number of other groups and the agencies in our state to get methane rules regarding this oil and gas industry that would help address 98% of these leaks and this waste in the state. So we're in the process of the final process of this rule with the New Mexico Environment Department right now, last week and this coming week. And why this is so significant is methane is 84 times more potent than other sources of greenhouse gases with climate change. And also you might have read just this last week that President Biden with the European Union leaders said that as part of going into the COP26, that the United States was agreeing to address methane and try to reduce it by 30% by 2030. So I would like to put forth an invitation, and I'm going to bring something up here on the screen, to make either a written public comment or a spoken public comment. And the spoken ones are really important as well at this ozone precursor rulemaking this week with the Environment Improvement Board. And I have all this information that can be sent out to folks. Whoops, this is not, let me see if I can get this to scroll down here. Okay, there we go. So I have all this information, and some of you might have seen it on things that I've sent out. And I have talking points on all of this. And the invitation is to, especially this next week, the public can give a comment at 9, 1, and 5 for half an hour. And it's best to sign up ahead of time with Pamela Jones. But you could just show up, but it's easier if you email ahead of time. And the links are all here on different days. So it would be 6, 7, 8, and 9, and 10. And just have a 2-minute public comment stating why you think that these methane rules are important and coming from your faith voice. So this last week, just to say, New Mexico Interfaith Power and Light had the majority, almost all of the people in support of this rule were people of faith, and a number of pastors and the head of the Conference of Churches spoke, all supporting this. And it makes a huge difference. And people are noting it, the people of faith, and they're saying, this is really good to hear these diverse voices speaking. These are not the environmentalists. And in fact, the environmentalists were lacking. I'm not sure why, but those who are in environmental groups were lacking. But fortunately, NMIPL organized, and it's a good thing we did, because otherwise the industry would have had many, they would have had, I mean, almost a total hearing, just them. So this is information, and these are the talking points, the basic ones. And basically, we are advocating in solidarity for the frontline communities who are suffering most from this, with asthma, rare cancers that we think are related to the oil and gas, devastation of the land and air up in the Four Corners area, but also in the Permian Basin. And so then there are some asks for some very specific things to do. And then there are more talking points here too. So maybe if somebody could tell me the best way to get this to folks, and I would even, like right now, I'd love to get anybody on the dotted line that is willing to comment this week, one of the days at 9, 1, or 5.
Joan, if you want, you can send it to me and I'll get it out to the group, and also put
Excellent.
it
Right when we,
all
perfect.
that.
Right when we finish this, I'll send it. And so my email will be there. So I've been trying to keep track and actually helping people, because this is not something that faith people are used to doing. And sometimes there, as you know from today, there are technical glitches, and I've had to help people get in or remind the hearing officer that somebody was on that wanted to speak. So, and so if you could do this, this would be really, really, really important. And it can make a big difference just offhand, and it won't take very much time at all. 30 minutes at the most, at 9, 1, or 5. So I would love to have some of you joined in for that. The other piece that I would like, and I'll send this through Andrew also, and I'm going to show you this also. And this is, you know, the New Mexico legislative session coming up in January is a short session. So it's going to be basically dealing with the budget. And to get anything else passed, it really has to be on the governor's call list or have her support. And so there's not much possible in that regard. So while we would like to have some large climate action, et cetera, you know, it's doubtful whether any of that's going to happen in the session, but we were working with the organization called SWEEP, Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, which works with low-income energy efficiency, low-income families. Oops, this is not wanting to go. I want to go down. Yeah, on this bill, a Low-Income Utility Affordability Act last session, and we really, really worked to try to get this through, and it was blocked in one particular committee. Which reminds me, one of the areas we really need to keep focusing on is getting financing for oversight in the oil and gas fields and in the industry. So that's up to the legislative finance committees in the House and the Senate, which are very difficult committees. So, but anyway, this Low Income Utility Affordability Act would affect everybody in the state, and it is really a great bill. And we worked on it last time and it didn't happen. So you'll get the information about this. So we're working on this because it addresses the many people in this state that can't even afford to pay their utilities. And many of our faith communities, and probably yours as well, try to help people if they can't pay their utility bills. So right now what we're inviting is groups to sign, just to say that they would be in support of this bill. There'll be other actions later on, but just in support of this concept even. You don't even have to say the bill, but we're in support of getting this. And then I am getting those group names to Tammy Feeblecorn, who works with SWEEP, who is kind of the leader in coordinating this bill. So again, this is another ask, and it could be from your Presbyterian church, it could be from other organizations, but it's the Low Income Utility Affordability Act. So that's the second very, very specific ask that I have for you. So before, do you have, I'm going through this kind of fast. Do you have any questions about this or the methane rules? Or actually the ozone rules related to methane? Are there some questions or comments or thoughts about this before I move on to another element?
I'll make a comment.
Mr. Joan?
Yeah, Richard, great.
All I want to say is that the state has tons of money right now, plenty of money to afford all these topics, including better methane regulation, oversight, et cetera. The state has tons of money, and hopefully the legislature won't waste it on other stuff. That's all I want to say. But it's not an issue of we can't afford it anymore.
Richard, you make a very good point. And really what it comes down to, I think, is political will. And I think that's where faith communities need to come in, because we need to bring forth this ethical, moral imperative that this has to be done. And let me just share, IPL is working down in Southeast New Mexico. About 8 years ago or so, we started working with faith leaders down there just to listen to them, hear what their concerns were, and also to just kind of try to bring up.
I am.
That's good.
I can hear it from the lead.
To try to bring up this this issue of methane and concerned about health problems for people down there.
Are you muted?
So in doing that, several years ago, we ended up having a retreat immersion experience with faith people from here in Albuquerque region, going down, and I organized some panels, and one was at the Episcopal Church. And we talked about some of these concerns, and it was rather controversial, but we said, we're here to listen. And I sort of moderated, so it did not devolve into something else, which can happen quite easily. And then we had one at the Catholic Church in Carlsbad, and there were enough people there, and they were hearing each other's stories about health problems, about seeing birds that no longer existed, about people moving out of the area because of all this pollution. And so they said, we have to do something. I said, well, why don't you form a little group? So a group started called Citizens Caring for the Future, which is basically under IPL, but it has to be their voices and not outside voices, because in that region of the state, everybody is considered an outsider unless you live right there. So Citizens Caring for the Future has done amazing work, have had so many meetings. They've made comments at public hearings. Every about 6 weeks, we've had working with them, they've had an educational session on some topic, something that they wanted. They're working on health concerns, and we have an organizer down there, a young organizer who is just excellent. One of the things from the very beginning they were concerned about were health concerns, and there's no monitoring down there of this. And as you're saying, Richard, there is funding to have it, but it is a political issue. And the political folks in that region of the state do not want that. So actually, Citizens Caring for the Future, I'm working with them right now to try to get funding through some EPA grant to engage a company in Colorado that does excellent, high quality monitoring to help monitor the air in that region. But Richard, as you said, the issue is not the lack of funding, but it is political and maneuvering all these political things. So that's why we have to keep moving forward with this ethical, moral voice and this imperative. And that's why the faith community's voices are so important. So you're absolutely right. And even more so why this has to cut through the politics. And it's not about this side or that side. It's about what is the right thing to do. So thank you. Other comments or questions?
It's also in the best interest of the producers. Colorado got this done. And as I understand it, the issue is the major producers are in favor of it. It requires a large expenditure up front, but they have now recouped all that and are making money. Methane is, of course, a flammable gas, and it adds to the gas supply. But the small producers are the obstacle because of the upfront cost. So they probably need to put in some kind of a tax credit or some state form of subsidy on the smaller producers to give them the upfront incentive to do it, because it's good for them in the long run. They'll make more money. It's good for the state because they'll make more money in terms of gross receipts tax, And it's obviously good for the health and environment of the citizens.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And some of the major companies, but not all of them, but have done this already. Just a kind of an aside, what some of those larger producers are doing with these wells that are not so productive, though, that they know are going to be closing at some point, is they're selling them off to the smaller producers so that they're not responsible for the environmental problems. They're also then not so responsible for any cleanup. And right now, another concern that we have been working on is the bonding issue in the state. There's not enough bonding for each of these wells for the real closing of them, cleanup, and that has to be done. So taxpayers are, and so we've tried to work on some legislation in the past to increase the bonding, and it has been fought by the industry, I have to say. So again, it's the ethical moral imperative, and that's why your voices are so important at this EIB hearing, in other ways in the legislative session. So yes, a very good point. Very good point. Any other comments before I'd like to touch on at least two other short things. Okay, so two other things that we are working on in terms of advocacy for some large changes. And one is what's called a green amendment to the Constitution. And have any of you heard of this? Okay, I'll send some information with Andrew as well. So that particular group, and there are several states that were trying to work on this, and New Mexico is one. And we had it last session as well, but it didn't make it through a certain committee. But it would change the Constitution, basically saying that the health and the environment have to be protected, and that needs to be a consideration in decisions. And it doesn't make it optional. It says it has to happen. So it's a slight change to the Constitution, but a slight change that would make a big difference. So that's another thing that we are supporting. And actually one of our board members who's Navajo and Hopi, Terry Sloan, is on the board of this or steering committee of the Green Amendment, which is multi-state. And he has been supporting it and also working with the Pueblos and the Navajo Nation to work on that. And then the final thing is an action for right now, and that's at the federal level. And that's on this climate change infrastructure bill that is massive, but is, we have to move forward on this. And this may be the only way and the only opportunity for, in this consolidated way, to get, other new forms of energy, research, job training, transition economically, et cetera. And so it was slated to be finished or have a vote by this 27th of this month, but that's not going to happen. So you're probably watching it in the news, but my ask is that you just contact your congressional delegates, whether both the House and the Senate. And of course we can say, oh, they're on board, but they need to hear, and that does have an impact and influence. It helps them in speaking to legislators in other states as well to encourage this. So that would be my other ask for today. And to put our faith in action and our love in action and our work as loving the world. So I know we're moving toward the end of our time. So does anybody have any comments or thoughts or questions they'd like to bring up? And again, I'll pass all this information on to Andrew.
Sister Joan?
Yes.
This is great because if Andrew sends this out to us, we can act. And the whole series this fall for our adult education is Matthew 25 today and Acts 2. So how can we act? These are great suggestions to act. And
Right.
it's our own state, the Southeast, the Permian Basin. This is our own state, and it's massively contributing to the methane issue. And it's we got to get to our state legislators better than we ever have before, basically.
Right. You're absolutely right, Richard. And also at the federal level too. So I just want to say in this federal package for a while, there was some subsidies for the gas industry. And nationally, different faith groups and others have, pushed to try to get that not there. So at least at the moment, I think it's taken out, and there actually is a tax being instated for that industry as part of this enormous package. But you're absolutely right. And so these actions. The other thing I might mention is Interfaith Power and Light. We have an advocacy group, and it's a big list of people that get all this information all the time. And it meets once a month, and it meets on the, I want to say, the first, let me see here. The first Wednesday, I think it's the first Wednesday of the month at 9 o'clock in the morning. But the information, if you just want to even be on the list, some people don't come to the meetings, but they get all the information that we send out and try to keep abreast of some of these things that are actions. So you're welcome to join that as well. Okay, other questions or thoughts before we have to close here?
Just gonna let folks know, we'll post all the stuff that Sister Joan has in the Earthkeepers newsletters, also our Facebook, and also can get it up on the church's Facebook as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Andrew.
Sure.
I just have to say it's just been great to be with you all this morning, and just look forward to your engagement and your actions, and hope to see some of you speaking at the EIB hearing this week. And also signing on for the Low Income Affordability Act, calling Congress, and just being in touch. So thank you. We're all in this together in our work, which is loving the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. This was great.
Sure.
Bye.